This is a Socialist News and Views special interview.
I'm Nick Schillingford, coming to you from the Urban Cabin Studios in South Minneapolis with this special interview. So yeah, we'll just jump in. So on Socialist News and Views, we let folks introduce themselves. Do you want to just tell our audience who you are?
Sure. So I'm Jake Ward. I'm a journalist. I've worked for NBC News, CNN, PBS, Al Jazeera, and I've covered technology for a long time. I'm old enough to have remembered back when people who covered tech were covering like gadgets and, silliness and robots and look at these cool airplanes. And at one time I was the editor-in-chief of Popular Science magazine, so I know that world really well. But over the last, I'd say 15 or 20 years, I was part of a kind of early group of journalists who started to think of this as a way of thinking about politics, as a way of thinking about inequality, as a way of thinking about power, surveillance, right? These things, I came up as a tech journalist through the NSA revelations, through the rise of social media, and now the rise of AI. And so the thing that I think about most right now is the ways in which AI is going to basically reprogram society, because I wrote a book predicting that commercial AI would do that, and that came out about a year before ChatGPT did. And that book is called The Loop: How AI is Creating a World Without Choices and How to Fight Back. And it's one of these books that I thought I was like 5 years early on, and it turns out I was like 2 financial quarters early on. And so I spend most of my time now reporting about and writing about AI at the Rip Current, the podcast and newsletter that I run.
That world of gadgets and robots, and it seems so fun and carefree these days.
I know,
doesn't it?
I know. Right back in the day, that was the thing. You just wanted to be kind of an upbeat nerd who just cared about, circuits, and that was the thing. It was easy to do. But then, it's just amazing how quickly money corrupts, right? And that's
Right.
sort of where we're at. Yeah,
It's
exactly.
gotten kind of creepier and creepier. Well, yeah,
Yep.
you're the host, and I think do pretty much everything over at the Rip Current on
Mhm.
Substack. And I'm gonna say the last video, but I was just watching your most recent video. But before that, one of the ones I had been watching recently was the one on the AI hive mind, the NeurIPS
Mhm.
conference. This is the first time I'm hearing of the NeurIPS conference, I think.
Yeah.
And so do you want to talk a little bit about that piece, about
Sure.
that conference, and then some of the themes that you encountered while you were attending?
Yeah, sure. So, the book that I wrote, the thesis of the book is essentially that AI is going to create the illusion of more and more choice, while in fact offering less and less choice, was one of the sort of central themes of the book. And I get a lot of pushback from people on that, because they say, well, what are you talking about? This thing is going to sort of uncork human creativity. It's going to give us access to the world's knowledge. It's going to supercharge our brains. And what I've sort of argued is, well, the trouble is that over time, because this thing is just one big statistical vacuum cleaner, it's going to just wind up giving us a smaller and smaller sampling of what's come before. Well, there's this conference, NeurIPS, is the big kind of intellectual academic conference connected to AI. And for years and years and years, it's been the place to go to see kind of where the top minds and the stuff are thinking about where their stuff is headed, what the limitations of the technology are, what's coming next. And in this case, one of the top papers, about a half dozen papers, were selected as the best out of thousands of papers that are presented at this conference. And one of them was this consortium of researchers from University of Washington, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon, a few others. And I can't remember the whole title, but the title is something like Artificial Hive Mind: How LLMs Are Shrinking Choice, or something like that. And basically what they did was they built a database of prompts, questions that you would ask AI, that request like creative answers. So rather than it being like, what's 2 + 2, or what's my zip code, it's questions like, I want to write this piece of poetry about this. Can you start me off? And what they figured out, so they applied these questions to 70 different large language models, ChatGPT, Claude, all of them. And what they found was that in each model, when you give these creative requests, the answers over time become more and more constrained. A narrower and narrower band of responses comes back at you. So for instance, you might write in and say, hey, I need to write a poem about time and the passage of time. And as you would imagine, like any kind of, cliched piece of poetry, it will kick back at you. Time is a river, and blah, 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 river, river. There's all this river, symbolism. So that's worrisome for these individual models. But what they also found is that across the 70 different models, they're all talking about frickin' rivers, right? They're all getting narrower and narrower in their thing, and that they share these narrower and narrower creative responses. And so the worry that these researchers write about in the paper is that we're going to form this kind of artificial hive mind in which at moments where we think we're getting a diversity of opinion by going, you might say, oh, I've spent so much time on ChatGPT, I need to expand my horizons a little bit and spend some time on Gemini. Well, sorry, turns out that's not going to get you new thinking. That's going to get you more of the same kind of thinking. And that is the theme that I've been coming back to again and again, is these places in which it feels like you're going to get, all of this sort of variety and creativity out of this thing. But more and more, it is just issuing you this very narrow, statistically probable bunch of suggestions. And the worry, of course, is that we're going to start accepting that stuff as gospel.
Yeah, I was hearing something on public radio at one point recently. There was somebody and they were trying to create, I think it was like kind of creative ad campaigns or something, and they were talking about how it really didn't give them that much each time, but like it would give you something eventually. So he guessed it was like 1 out of like 100 times. So he would kind of just put return, return, return. He's like, most times it's just going to give you whatever. If I just asked a random person, it's going to tell me probably what they said. And then it'd be like the river or the sand slipping away or something.
That's right. That's right. Sand through the hourglass. Exactly.
but he said that 1 out of 100, it'll give you something really creative. And I'm like, I think humans can do a lot better than that. So like, what's
totally? No one's going to sit there and click it 100 times.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like you're going to take the first one that comes at you if you're doing your homework or you're rushed to write a wedding vow or whatever it is. So yeah, that's the concern, right? Is that we're in a world where it's going to feel like we've got more choice, but subtly our choices are going to be more and more constrained over time.
Yeah, and you talked in the recent one about how it's gonna, just about how it seems like it's getting us to like lie to each other and create these like worlds that aren't actually real. And it's like, yeah, I mean, and some of it's just directly lies. Some of the stuff it says is just completely false. And it's like, there's been something at our household about, it's some financial thing, how long something takes, and it's like, there's an argument going on between ChatGPT and somebody, a real person who should actually know the answer. And it's funny just to see.
Yeah. And and the trouble with that, right, is that you're in a position where, maybe this is a Gen X thing. That's what I am. Right. And Gen X and older, but like, I feel like a lot of people I know in my life are basically passing off the work and the thinking of the, quote unquote thinking. It's not really thinking, but the thinking of of ChatGPT and the rest of it as their own work and their own thinking. And I feel like the unspoken marketing of these products is this thing is going to let you fool your boss into thinking you're more productive than you really are, kind of stuff. And there are many tech people who are working in an environment in which that's not the case. But I think in a lot of environments, that's going to be the case. Certainly in education, that's going to be the case. And so, and then the extra problem is, so we're in this little window, I think right now, where we're all kind of fooling each other with this stuff. And then the next turn of the wheel, the problem with that is that what the psychological research has shown, because a huge amount of my job has to do with matching what's going on in tech with what's going on in psychological and behavioral research. The behavioral scientists all say, well, if you lie about a thing long enough, you begin to believe the lie. Like memory is just a series of reconstructed beliefs. It's not actual recall. And so over time, as you repeat a thing, you just begin to believe that thing is true. And so for me, my worry is that like I'm picking up advice from these systems. I'm then kind of like passing that advice off as my own thinking somehow. And it's going to make me more susceptible to both like to believe that thought was my own. And as a result, accept some inputs from these systems that I wouldn't otherwise agree with. So I'm already getting advice from these things about like how to conduct myself on social media or how to do marketing that I'm like, man, fuck off. I don't want you to tell me that, and instead, I'm because I regurgitated it often enough, I'm worried that I'm going to just start to, you know, sort of be incepted with that kind of thinking. So there's some really subtle behavioral things going on here that I think we are not ready for as a society.
Yeah, I mean, I put my podcast out on SoundCloud too, and the music on SoundCloud that's like generated by AI has definitely like just taken off.
Yeah,
Because I mean, before theoretically, one of the limits to, creating like a bot account was like you can't just like continually create new content every day for however many, accounts. But
right.
theoretically now theoretically you can create all this content that's at least slightly
Yeah,
different enough that it's a new piece of content, and then you can just
totally.
keep pumping it out there. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's going to be coming down the I
That's
mean
right.
it's just
And
going to
my,
clutter things up a lot, I think. In a
yeah,
lot of ways it's going to make things look like old websites. If you think, the way there was
yeah,
things everywhere, it's going to be like that, I think, but in like
I agree. But
real
I agree.
life it's terrifying.
The slop roulette is going to be
Yeah.
so overwhelming. And I mean, the other thing that I think is really important to just sort of like keep in mind is that the music that these things compose in this and the scenes they make, the movie like scenes they
Right.
make, and the poetry they write are going to be just good enough, and they're going to get better and better, but they're going to be just good enough to tickle a part of our emotional center such that we're quite moved by it. You're going to find, and I think this is true in like, AI generated sexually explicit stuff and the way
Mm-hmm.
in which AI girlfriends will talk to people and all of that stuff is going to, I think, actually like set off our emotional and attachment circuitry. We're not going to be like, this sucks, this AI piece of music. Instead, we're going to be like, that's pretty catchy. And
And
so,
some of it is, yeah,
and some of it
already,
is
I mean, it's like kind of going to that lowest common denominator of like, what are the three components that's going to make
that's
this
right.
like, like you
That's
said,
right.
tickle somebody's fancy in some way, and it's just
Totally.
going to keep realigning those components and pumping them out, and it's going to work at least for a
That's
while, and then
it
it's probably
definitely
going to get
is.
smarter. So
And I think that, and the thing that I think we just don't know enough about ourselves is how low the common denominator really is.
yeah, yeah,
Like we like to believe that we are somehow very, very sophisticated and that our senses and our filtration system is sophisticated. And I'm here to tell you, as somebody who has studied this stuff for
yeah.
a long time, that is not the case, unfortunately.
Yeah, around Halloween, I didn't know how much I like to see different woodland animals steal candy from the bowl of candy and
Yeah,
get scared or
yeah,
whatever. But
right.
apparently, I liked it a lot because I kept seeing
Totally.
it, or it kept showing it to me, and I kept watching it for some reason. So I'm like,
That's
okay,
right. No,
this
I
is
the
ridiculous.
the guy who made the whoever it was that made the How Do I Start an F-16 Sea Shanty song. This is a thing
Yeah,
that's going around on TikTok right now. It's literally like operational instructions on how to fire up an F-16, and they made it into this like rhyming sea shanty. It is the catchiest freaking song ever. I wish they could, I if they had a full-length version of it, I would totally, walk around listening to it. And I'm like, man, I'm falling right into the trap that I've been warning people about for years. So it's a don't blame yourself, everybody, is I guess my main message. It's totally natural.
yeah, and I think if there's anybody that doesn't think that there's going to be a bad elements to any technology that's coming out, I mean, they're just delusional, right? I mean,
Yeah.
everything that's come out, I mean, there's been some elements that are uh, you know less pro-social, more anti-social, and
Yep.
and other elements like that. And of course, it's always the people in power that have most of the control over these
Yeah.
technologies, and if they let it get into our control, they usually try to try to pull it back, like they've kind of been doing with the internet for a while now.
Yeah.
I feel like people maybe got a little control over it briefly, and then they're like, no, 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 that's not going to work. But
Yeah, I mean, as
so
soon as people can make a profitable product out of it or capture the market around a thing, they're going to do
they're
that.
going to
And
figure.
and the thing that I'm with the way that the AI world is moving, that I've been really surprised by is I feel like for years and years and years as a journalist, you spent a lot of time with people kind of in interviews, they would deny that there are negative effects to the thing that
Mm,
they have built.
right.
Now we're in this weird world where the marketing strategy has to do with actually naming the bad things and in some cases exaggerating the bad things in weird ways. So you have like the people at the tops of these companies saying openly, like, yeah, this thing might grow an independent streak and enslave us all, and we
Right.
have to, and we got to be careful about that. Or, you've got um, the founder of Anthropic is a guy, co-founder is a guy named Dario Amodei, and he said, recently that he said, I think we could cure cancer and balance the budget, and we might still have 20% unemployment because of this product that we're making. You should be very concerned about what we're building, right?
Yeah.
And there's this sort of, this is the first time in my career that I've met people who are so convinced, or at least want to sound so convinced, that there's a good effect coming, that there's a utopia that this is going to make possible, so wonderful that it's okay that in the short term, everyone's going to lose their job, and
Right.
slop will be everywhere, and you'll never trust video evidence again, and all of that stuff, and kids will never date each other, and
Yeah.
and there's something weird about the weird belief system that they seem to have adopted that says, like, it'll all be worth it. That's a
Right.
weird new thing for me.
Right. Yeah. And well, I think that brings us nicely to the next topic, from AI to crypto, and talking about because in between that starting point and when everything's great, they're going to make a bunch of money off of it, or at least get a bunch of handouts to work on it from our tax dollars, probably.
That's right.
And they already are. But yeah, in the last election that we got Donald Trump out of, I was noticing how big crypto companies were in that. I mean, they were like on both sides, and they had their hands all over that election. And in his first term, I actually didn't even remember this, but I was reading Trump had called Bitcoin, quote, probably a scam. That was according to CBS News,
Right.
in his first term. But yet the next election, he comes along, he takes power, and his current administration's been super crypto friendly. I know, JD Vance was like a crypto lover. And then even in Kamala Harris's opportunity agenda for Black men, it included an item 3, which was, quote, protect cryptocurrency investments so Black men who make them know their money is safe, end quote. I didn't know where that was coming from. I was like, that seems kind of like an odd, but you have crypto. It's getting bigger and bigger, and it's getting its little tendrils into everything. What are the biggest positives and negatives that are going on with crypto right now? What should people be paying attention to?
Well, so once upon a time, I had a number of friends who, whose opinions I respect about many, many things, who were really trying to sell me on the idea that crypto would be a great equalizer in the financial world. And they were particularly concerned with the ways in which most of the world is shut out of economic opportunity by being in either a fairly corrupt economy or a very, very dysfunctional economy, where their currency isn't worth much, and where getting their money into a market other than the local dysfunctional economy wasn't possible. And so you could, you'd hear people say, well, we could have entrepreneurs from all over the world able to all be in the same market together, and the fluidity of that was kind of the selling point. And I in an academic way, I was like, okay, yeah, I can see that, sure. And I've been to plenty of places around the world where clearly there's enormous economic opportunity because there's enormous entrepreneurial spirit and people are very smart and all that stuff, but they just can't get out of where they're at. Okay, I get that. But it turns out that the sort of the sales pitch of crypto, right, which for anyone who doesn't know is basically just an agreement between two parties that this code represents a dollar value, but it's not backed by anything. It's no actual connection to worth. It doesn't make anything. It doesn't derive from anything. It is just an agreement between people. And so it's literally like kids on a playground being like, these jelly beans are more expensive, are worth more than these jelly beans. These blocks are the most expensive blocks. Like, it's that kind of handshake. So the fluidity of it and that intangibility of it, which my friends were academically saying could create enormous opportunity because it allows capital to move all around the world so easily and allows anyone to get in, turns out to also make this stuff an incredible vector for not just criminality, because it's an untraceable and fluid currency that criminals love to use to launder their money, but it's also untraceable as a piece of political donation. So, right, since the dawn of the Trump administration's second term, World Liberty Financial, its crypto business, has taken in incredible amounts of money. And basically, what the playbook of people all over the world now who want to get in with the Trump administration is you buy crypto, you buy this coin that one of several Trump related cryptocurrencies, and what you're essentially doing is putting an untraceable, anonymous, and perfectly fluid amount of money into the pocket of that family. There's a Guardian article about this, in which they quote Stephen Levitsky, a professor of government at Harvard University. He wrote this book, How Democracies Die. He says, quote, "I've never seen such open corruption in any modern government anywhere." And that's because, I mean, right, you're seeing individuals. There's a guy named Justin Sun who has invested $75 million in World Liberty Financial, and Trump and his two older sons have like a 60% stake in this. There's literally money into their pocket. So it is, as is true of all of these technologies, right? It has an incredible potential to level the playing field, disintermediate something that's traditionally had really powerful gatekeepers, like it democratizes, blah, 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 blah. Yes, but very, very quickly, like water seeping in between the cobblestones, the money and the opportunity there invites trouble. And that, in this case, I think is just so brazen and open. And so it's really created and this is a totally unregulated thing. There's nobody looking over this right now. The Securities and Exchange Commission under the Biden administration was trying to regulate this stuff. Now all of that's gone. They've dropped all the investigations into people. President Trump has just pardoned the founder of Binance, big crypto, one of the world's biggest crypto exchanges, a guy who is, in real legal trouble. So I think it just, unfortunately, the fluid nature of it, which was its selling point, has also become the source of incredible corruption.
And so, yeah, we just have Donald Trump right out in the open, like you said, and the Trump family taking these huge amounts of money that we can't really, as you mentioned, keep an eye on. And it's like, it feels like that should be like a huge story, doesn't it? Like theoretically, if you're like in any way connected to journalism.
It's crazy. Like any of these stories these days, in the old days, would have been like a 3-week news cycle. Any one of these, right? Remember the ballroom he knocked down? Like, he tore out a chunk of the White House. Like, it's hard to, that wasn't very long ago,
No.
And we are, and we moved right on past that because there's so much else to cover. So, the jamming of the signals is really what's happening there, is that the conventional, the bandwidth of, as a reporter, I can tell you, the bandwidth of a reporter can only hold so much. And this administration has sort of jammed the airwaves such that, this stuff is, like you say, stuff that should have been not just front page news, but like front page news for like a week is now getting like below the fold coverage, to use an old fashioned term, that lasts like a day. And then that's it.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's something we can use AI for good for, is to keep track of all the like insane stuff that Trump does. Set it up in one place where it keeps like popping up with each thing as they comes along or something.
Yes.
Maybe that's what we need. We need to work on. Maybe somebody has that already. I don't know.
There are some entrepreneurs out there, and I work with a couple of them in some sort of ideas about a practical use of AI as like a thing that keeps track of a story over time, or a thing that keeps track of someone's credibility over time. That's another one that I think could be really useful, right? Is something like you're too young to remember. There was something called Clout once upon a time, KLOUT. It was literally, this is back before that was considered a bad word.
Sure.
And it was an amalgamated score based on all of your different social media to say how much impact does this person have across social media. I want that for like credibility. right? I want someone to, like, when they pop up in the news, I would like the feed to be like, or
Yeah.
like so,
Yeah.
73% or 42%,
Yeah.
trustworthiness. Like, and we could absolutely, I think, do
Yeah.
that based on these systems.
We just got to make sure that it stops with public figures, and then we don't
Yeah,
assign those to every single person in the
I
world
know.
for
I
all
know.
time, and that's harder. That's harder to actually get that
Yeah.
level of control when our
That's an interesting like academic question. Like, where should it stop? Right. Because like
right,
all of us have a credit score.
right,
Every single person is being evaluated for their credit worthiness. I wonder
right,
where where the buck should stop. But I think
right.
you're right. Like it should at least
Politicians, yeah,
let's start
politicians
with
at least,
politicians.
yeah.
Let's start with that. And politicians, maybe C-suite executives, that'd be
Yeah,
probably good,
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
journalists. I wouldn't mind if journalists were held to
Sure,
that standard. I
sure,
think that'd be smart.
sure.
So yeah, that's funny.
Well, I really appreciate that. I'm always trying to think of like things that aren't terrifying and terrible
Yeah.
because there's so much stuff coming. Is there anything, science or technology wise that you've seen lately that's got you, excited or upbeat or feeling good?
Oh, I really appreciate that question. Yeah, because I know I can be a real bummer on this topic, and it's nice to think about what are some of the good things. So
trying to cover
first,
reality, and it's kind of a bummer. So
yeah,
we
it is a
gotta,
bummer. It is
but
a
people
bummer.
can't take 100% bummer,
Well,
unfortunately,
that's
and
right. And
fortunately.
I think one of the things that I think about a lot is like I'm actually, in spite of what I cover, a deeply optimistic person about humanity in general. Like I'm just a big fan of how much we've managed to pull off as just a civilization in terms of like fairness and peace and uh, you know, um, wonder and creativity, and there's just cool stuff that humans have managed to pull off. I've spent a huge amount of my time talking to like evolutionary biologists, people who study like how did we evolve and what were the pressures that pushed us along, and when you look at how like our brains have evolved, and you compare it to what life was like, even a few thousand years ago, it rocks right now. Like it's so much better. Like I know there's a lot of trouble, inflation's a problem, unemployment's a problem. There's real pressures and difficulties in this world, but you're not dying on the way to the grocery store. You're not dying trying to get food the way we once did. So for me, just like fundamentally the backdrop for all of this is like, I love being alive right now, and I'm glad that we are. And so I'm happy about that. Uh, I think that AI as a technology is actually going to make all kinds of really interesting scientific discoveries, and it's going to make them happen pretty quick. And just because there's a lot of stuff that really is just no more complicated than just pattern recognition that human beings have had to do in the past, and suddenly AI can do. So like in the old days, like astronomy, you literally like a graduate student in astronomy would get assigned the task of, here are 3 different photographs of the same portion of the night sky. Look at them together and see if you can spot what's different from one to the next. And literally, some poor grad student, she'd have to sit there with like a ruler, right, and be like, oh, this star seems a little bit different. And based on that, you'd be like, oh, that's a comet, or that's this, or crazy. Now, I mean, you can just feed reams and reams and reams and reams of data into a system, and it'll be like, here's everything that's moving, here's everything that's not, here's what's going on. And I know a guy named Azer Raskin, he's part of the team that made The Social Dilemma about social
Oh,
media,
sure.
and a very smart and interesting guy. He's a sort of reformed entrepreneur. He's using AI systems to try to decode the language of animals.
Hmm.
And it's fascinating because, like, he's not quite there. We're not going to have like the Google Translate of the animal kingdom quite yet because it's more complicated than that. But he's figured out all kinds of stuff, like um, that animals, that crows are truly like teaching skills to one another in these really fundamental and amazing ways. That whales have names that they
Hmm.
use with one another. Like, there's just some cool stuff coming down the pike. We're going to need to keep all those animals alive in the meantime,
Right.
but it's really cool what we're going to know about the world pretty quickly, and I think we'll be able to plug it into some of the kind of, we're going to be able to make this stuff interesting and compelling and useful fast in a way that I think is going to have people kind of wanting to prioritize it. So I'm excited about that part of it. I think that the raw science is very cool. Now, should we as a result be like foisting AI girlfriends on 12-year-olds? No,
Right.
I don't think we should. But the scientific possibilities are very, very cool.
And I think, knowing those whales' actual names certainly can help with not killing them all.
I mean,
that
right?
seems like it would be a good, certainly couldn't hurt.
If you could show that orangutans are like, comforting their young in this way and this, that, and the other, yeah, I think your human opinion of the need to preserve their habitat would be a whole different game. So yeah, there's some cool stuff coming that way.
Well, I really appreciate your time. Are there you have any final thoughts or anything else you want to say or promote before you go?
Well, I really appreciate this, Nick. I thought this is a nice, thoughtful conversation on a rainy Friday here in California. I really appreciate this. I host this podcast called The Rip Current. I'm desperately trying to figure out how the hell to make it sort of work as a business. So YouTube is the best way to find that if you'd
Sure.
like. I am I'm at by Jacob Ward on all platforms. I'm pretty easy to find online. So The Rip Current and social media. Yeah, follow me. I would love that.
Yeah, and I'll include links in the show notes for that stuff so folks can go check it out. Yeah, a lot of good information that I don't seem to be getting anywhere else. So,
oh, good.
Thanks so much, Jacob.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Have a great holiday. Take care.
Yeah, you too. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
And that's our special interview. Thanks for listening. Solidarity.
This has been a Socialist News and Views special interview.